What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Bulls Latest. Your host, Matt Johnson here. I wanted to kick today's show off by rewinding about a year to an episode of a Podcast P with Paul George, that LeBron James was talked about. Carmelo Anthony was present on this episode with Mikal Bridges, but they talked about how close it came to them teaming up and going to Chicago to start fresh in a new big city. They ultimately decided to go separate ways there. Obviously, LeBron went and teamed up with Dwayne Wade in Miami. Chris Bosh joined them as well. That group would win 2 rings, and then they would go on and kind of separate their own ways there. However, outside of the New York Knicks, which Carmelo Anthony talked with LeBron about joining them as well in a big city, Chicago was a destination that they were close to kind of making a push to go to. I think when Carmelo stated, let it be Chicago, I'm coming from Denver, you're coming from Cleveland, let's start a new thing here, let's go to another big city and make a name for ourselves there. You can't help as a Bulls fan but look back on what could have been. D Rose obviously starting his prime run with the Bulls at that moment in time. That could have been an exciting time in Chicago Bulls history. I think they would have definitely ended up bringing at least one championship back to the city of Chicago. However, the Miami Heat would dominate the mid or to early 2010s there, winning those 2 championships. And Carmelo never really ended up getting what he wanted in New York. Didn't win his championship. Obviously was an ultra talented player in Denver, and then showed a lot of flashiness in New York, put up big numbers, big scoring numbers, had some injury problems, but nothing ever kind of panned out there for him. So for him as well, I'm sure it's a moment to look back on of what could have been for him as well if he teamed up with LeBron. So that was just a quick note to start today's show. I wanted to switch gears and look at this Bulls roster from an overall perspective and run down some names and what to expect from how it currently holds. Obviously, Isaac Okoro joining this roster as a result of the Lonzo Ball trade to Cleveland. I think Isaac Okoro it's going to be a solid defensive upgrade for this roster. Going to be coming at a decently expensive clip there. So as a Bulls fan, you want to hope that he's worth the contract that the Bulls took on there. I think Isaac Okoro will produce a lot more than Bulls fans expect, and I think it's going to be a pleasant surprise as to how he's going to kind of rejuvenate his career from what's been kind of a slow start as a formerly top draft pick there. And then you got Kobe White. Obviously, I've talked about him more so along the NBA draft there and close to it in an effort that the Bulls could possibly trade him. It's looking increasingly likely that he's going to stick around along with Nikola Vucevic. I mean, talks have kind of big stagnant on both guys. Obviously, we're super early in the NBA offseason still, but Kobe White could be the face of this team along with Manas Buzelis moving into next season as it stands right now. Obviously, Josh Giddey, the free agent, is still going over things with Chicago. As a restricted free agent, he's more than likely to stay with the Bulls. I think a deal is going to get done at some point. I've talked about this many times in my show, but I think Josh Giddey will ultimately be given somewhere in the middle ground of a deal between 25 and hopefully they don't get to $30 million a year, but I think $25 million would suffice there. The Bulls had offered 20, which is far lower than what Giddey and his camp want. So assuming he sticks around, he'll be a valuable leader there, coming off one of his more solid seasons in his NBA career. And then some guys that I don't expect to stick around, Javon Carter and Talen Horton-Tucker. Javon Carter, a veteran point guard who doesn't really see fit to this roster. The Bulls are kind of loaded at guard and have a lot of young guards at that and young wing players. So I think Javon Carter is going to see his way out. Bulls, obviously, Summer League phenom Yuki Kawamura signing that 2-way contract. He's in a very exciting position here. I think Yuki is going to provide a lot, whether it's with the Windy City Bulls or this big league club. I think Yuki is a very exciting 5'8" spark plug for this team. So you guys all know how I felt about him during the summer league and moving into next season. Ayo Dosunmu continues to be the guy talked about in trade situations. I think the Bulls will ultimately end up dealing him in his $7.5 million. That's going to count on the year of his contract moving forward, the year left. So I think it's increasingly likely he will be shipped somewhere, and the Bulls will probably end up hanging on to Kobe White, is what it looks like right now. Trey Jones, obviously signing that extension. Super excited to have him around. He showed a lot of great things, along with Kevin Huerter and Zach Collins in that trade that ultimately sent Zach LaVine to the Sacramento Kings. Those guys all produced, and they will be back. And I expect Zach Collins and Kevin Huerter to play solid roles on this team. And I think Billy Donovan has a great plan for how to include those guys moving into this next season. And then you have the unproven, obviously, Julian Phillips, Emmanuel Miller, and Dalen Terry are three young guys. Dalen Terry's been around with this Bulls team a little longer, hasn't really gotten going. I don't know if that's going to happen this year, so we'll see what happens with his future. Julian Phillips, the Bulls traded up to get him in a recent draft here. Didn't show much this past year. Hopefully he gets some more playing time. And then Emmanuel Miller, I was high on him during this summer league, hoping that we'd get to see more from him. We ultimately didn't. They still signed him to that two-way deal. So I'm interested to see how he produces with the Windy City Bulls organization, and then if he gets any tick with the big league club moving forward. Patrick Williams and Jalen Smith, two guys that obviously you know what I think of Pat Williams. I think that contract was a mistake. I think he's, if anything, Bulls fans, if they don't end up moving him, I know I talked about Milwaukee as a possible suitor, but if the Bulls don't end up moving Pat Williams, you got to have him produce to what they paid him, or at least somewhat close to that. I don't know if that's going to happen. One can hope he works his ass off this offseason and continues to push forth the effort into becoming the player Bulls fans want him to become. So Nikola Vucevic, along with Kobe White, he's kind of in a similar situation here. Trade talks ever since last year's trade deadline were heating up when it came to Vuce, and I think Vuce is going to be a guy who, if he sticks around, you look at and I'll get into this a little bit later, with the Bulls win total sitting at 32.5. If Kobe and Vuce are in that starting lineup, I don't see how the Bulls don't come close to hitting the over on the wins in a weak Western or Eastern Conference going into this season. Obviously, you have guys like Tyrese Halliburton and Jason Tatum out with Achilles injuries, and then Damian Lillard, the newest guy to join the injury plague there when it comes to the Achilles situation. So it's going to be a very different looking and a weaker Eastern Conference moving into the 2025-26 season. So if you're the Bulls and you do end up keeping Nikola Vucevic, and then you're going to win some ball games that you probably don't want to if you're a lot of Bulls fans out there. I think the plan A would be getting as much value as you can for a guy like Vuce and Ayo Dosunmu if you move him. Plan B would obviously be keeping those guys together and winning as many games as possible. Obviously, we'll get into the outlook here in a little bit, but the Bulls have a history of winning more games than, the fan base would have liked them to almost choose a direction rather than winning meaningless ball games. So, overall, this roster, you obviously have Noah Senge, the international rookie, the first-round pick by the Bulls, and Lachlan Olbrich, the second-round pick by the Bulls. Two exciting young players. I'm excited for Noah Senge, and like I talked about yesterday, I think he could blossom into a starter a lot quicker than people anticipate. I get it, he's 18 years old, he's a raw talent, but look out for Noah Senge to jump into the starting lineup rather quickly. So, switching gears here, I wanted to kind of talk about way too early 2025-26 predictions here. I think the Bulls are going to hit the over on their 32.5 wins, and here's why. I ultimately think that they're going to at least hold on to one of two, Kobe White and Nikola Vucevic, to start this next year. And then, obviously, with Vuce putting up double-doubles every night, it's going to be hard not to win games more often than not. So I just think when you look at this team, they have the seventh lowest over-under win total in the NBA, the fourth lowest mark in the East, and that currently is probably projecting a lot of these guys to kind of shift to another home here. We haven't seen that yet, and granted, it's way too early to predict this, but I'm going to do it anyway. This Bulls team, some teams that have a higher projection than the 32.5 wins, the Bulls say that. Toronto Raptors, Portland Blazers, who I think the Blazers are going to be an exciting team in the West. The only thing holding them back is that that's a tough Western Conference. And then the Sacramento Kings, I'm not sure why that total is set where it is. They're kind of a mess. Obviously, it's due to probably having veteran talent there as well. So the Kings and the Bulls in a similar situation as it stands today with veterans on that roster. So, I think with the Bulls currently in line to bring back 14 of their 15 players that ended last year on the active roster, we're going to see a lot happen still, hopefully. But it would not surprise me at all, given this front office's track record, if we start next season with both Kobe White and Nikola Vucevic on the roster. But, we'll see. We'll see how it shakes. The only player at this time that is probably a shoo-in to not return is Talen Horton-Tucker, and I'm fine with that. I don't think he's much of an impact on this roster as it stands. I think, when you look at the East overall, like I was talking about, it's weak. You got injuries and cornerstone players on Indiana and formerly Milwaukee's with Portland now, but Damian Lillard and then, Jason Tatum. Boston's going to go through an overhaul and a growing season that we haven't seen from them in a long, long time. So one can only think what the East is going to look like. Obviously, the New York Knicks are going to be probably pushing at the top of that conference. And we'll see how it looks going forward. So I expect the Bulls ultimately to compete right along the lines of where they've been the last 3 seasons, looking to make the play-in tournament yet again here. So, just a way too early look at 2025-26 here. That's my prediction. I think the Bulls will ultimately win somewhere between 34 and 36 games. And kind of hover the play-in situation once again there. Wanted to wrap up today's show by just giving you guys a Windy City Bulls update. The Windy City Bulls are going to hold tryouts for prospective local players, and those will take place on September 6th at the Chicago Hope Academy Fieldhouse in Chicago. This will be 2 sessions of tryouts. Participants will be competing for an invitation to Windy City Bulls training camp, which is set to begin in late October. So an interesting note there, kind of reminded me of the Mark Wahlberg starred movie and Invincible with the Philadelphia Eagles doing tryouts. Obviously, this is with the G League affiliate, but still bringing in local talent to try out in the city of Chicago there should be interesting. The Bulls will have representatives there. Obviously, the Windy City Bulls will be there as well. Kind of looking over some prospects in terms of who they can potentially bring in. I'd be interested to see who they brought in to get a shot at training camp with the Windy City Bulls in October. So just a fun note there. Windy City Bulls update to cap today's show off. Let me know what you guys want to see this Bulls roster look like moving into next season. What's your prediction for this next season? Do you think the Bulls are going to be worse than they were this past year, the last couple of years? Do you think it's going to be somewhere along the lines of being a play-in team? I think the latter. I think a play-in destination and a play-in appearance once again is likely, especially if they keep these guys around and start next season up till the trade deadline. But, we'll see. The offseason's still young. A lot could still happen. I know I've gone both ways a lot in recent episodes in terms of what the Bulls could do with this roster, who could move, who's been rumored to move, and who's going to stay. So everything continues to swirl in terms of talks with the Bulls and guys on this roster, most notably Ayo Dosunmu, Nikola Vucevic, and Josh Giddey, and then Kobe White there as well. So we'll keep you guys up to date on all this stuff. Again, I want to thank you for joining me on another episode of Bulls Latest, and we will see you tomorrow.